back again. This is going to be like part 2 of my A to Z rifle build. So, a little summary what I did before. Put a 20 MOA pick rail on this Browning rifle. Put some JB weld on there. No release agent. Let it dry for at least 24 hours. And now I'm going to pull out the screws and clean those off. So this is the second part of what I do. Like I said, let it dry for 24 hours. And all these screws have release agent put on it, just some floor wax. And hopefully everything will come out nice and easy because of the release agent used on here. Sometimes you might have one of these that just doesn't want to come out. So you can either take a knife, kind of work it up, or it'd be easier just to dump the gun upside down. But I just threaded that through there. As you can see in this one, might be really hard. This little screw here does have some JB weld on the back side of it, which if it does, you can just pop it off or use a knife to pop. Scrape it off a little bit just to get it nice and clean. Just easy as that. Now I'm going to dump all of these guys into some little dish. Take some acetone. And I just want to clean off all that wax off there. So dump that in there, let them soak for a couple minutes, and then just dry those off. If you do have any bigger material on there, you could take a like a wire brush or any sort of old, mop, boar brush, whatever you might have, and kind of scrape it off. But these look pretty good. Just let them sit there and soak for a couple minutes. So now I'll let these little guys sit in here for a couple minutes in acetone. And now I just want to, I don't know if it means anything, but I try to avoid getting acetone on my fingers. It's not going to hurt you, not going to kill you. But I just rotate it over a little bit and try to grab those so I'm not getting it all over my fingers. Because you do this enough, you'll start cracking your fingers, which doesn't really matter. But some I'm just looking at, even though my hands are getting full of it. So, transfer those over. Got them to another little dish here. I'm going to dry them off. And try not to drop them on the ground. Acetone will dry pretty quickly, but I want to give it a little bit of time to dry. So it's good to have everything right in front of you. So I put that little tray right there. Now I'm going to set up my little torque wrench, little fat wrench here. And always make sure you figure out what specs your rifle manufacturer recommends, the rings, the rails, whatever it might be. Go off that information and trust it. You don't want to be over torquing these things. And for this Browning X bolt, I usually do 18 inch-pounds. And make sure you're using inch-pounds and not foot-pounds because there's a big difference there. But before I even use anything like that, I'm going to lightly torque them in using a crisscross pattern as I'm going through here. That way I'm not, torquing it one way or the other by tightening all these down and then tighten the front ones down. So I'm going to do alternating front and back crisscross pattern. And I also like to use blue Loctite. There's a lot of people who say you shouldn't use it because it does add some liquid onto the threads, which might make it increase your torque settings. And some people say just do it dry, but no matter what gun I do it on, this is a 6.8 Western. If I use it on my 30 cals, I just put a little bit of Loctite on. And the best way to do it is to take some Loctite, which I'll show you guys. Put a little dab onto your little tray. And then take something like a toothpick. This is going to be kind of hard. Take a toothpick, dab the toothpick, and just get a little bit here onto these threads. If you do it the other way and try to drop it from there onto it, you're going to get a ton, and that's going to just be a little overkill and then could impact your torque settings, like I said. So I'm just going to drop those in there and get them kind of started, and then work my way through doing this exact same thing here. Getting a little bit of Loctite on the threads. Drop them in, move to the next one. Okay, now again, like I said, I could use a torque wrench. But I don't want to torque them down all the way right now. I just want to get these all started. And I'm just going to use finger tight here. Start working it down. Even get right before I even get to it. Just go finger tight. Alternate to the front. Same thing. Still crisscrossing as I'm going. Stopping just before I feel tension. Go back to the back ones. Same thing. And you'll see throughout the whole process, I'm not using the top part of this T-handle, just using my hands down below, so that way I don't torque them too tight and over torque them. Because depending sometimes on the action you're using, I've noticed some actions on these front ones, the threads are a little bit less than on the rear ones, so you definitely do not want to over torque the front ones and strip them out. So then you can have a mess. It's not fun. Okay, I got a torque wrench set to 18 inch-pounds. Same thing, crisscross. I'm going to go, if they're not all the way touching yet, I'm going to make them a little bit closer because I have a little bit more torque right now holding this compared to the other T-handle wrench. So I got them all roughly hand tight. So I'm going to go to 18 inch-pounds. Until it breaks over, we move the front one. I'm doing opposite again, crisscrossing in the front even. Come to the back one. Crisscross all the way to the front. Do Q-tip first. Just kind of clean them up. I just don't want anything on there that could add any sort of binding or torque to the rings when I put it on there, like a little button of Loctite or something like that that somehow hardens. And this is why earlier too, when I was bedding it with the JB Weld, I also cleaned these up to make sure there was no little bit of JB Weld that was going to stick on anything. Now it's going to be time to mount our rings on the scope and then mount the scope. One thing I like to do every time I get a new set of rings, so these are actually some Seekins rings. These are the .87 lows. I will open them up and keep them exactly how they are because they are machined this way when you open them up from the package. You'll see here I took a silver Sharpie marker and marked these two spots, and then there's nothing on the back side. And then this other one, I did it differently so I would recognize it. Just one on that side and one on the opposite side. So that means if I'm doing this, I won't take the top one of this one and put it over here because that ain't gonna match. So these are not the rings I want to use for that one. This is the ring for over here. We'll explain why a little bit later. So I need to set my eye relief first. So I'm gonna take one of the rings, just kind of mount it on here. Should be T25. And I'm just going to mock these up in a general location, not really tighten them down. Just kind of get them roughed in here. I'll take my rifle scope. This is the Vortex Viper PSP Gen 2, 5 to 25 by 50. Just gonna set it in there. And I want to make sure we got the right ring height. So the first thing I'm just looking at is to make sure I don't have any contact. Sometimes if you mount these scopes further back, the rings are gonna start hitting on the bell. They're gonna start hitting on some of your turret housing, or you could have the bell of the scope hit on your Picatinny rail, or even potentially hitting on the barrel. So make sure you got everything right before I start torquing everything down and working on it, because if I didn't get the right rings, now would be the great time to go to the goHUNT gear shop and get some other rings real quick. But I'm just gonna mock these up a little bit. I like to space my rings out as far as possible. To me, it makes a little bit more sense to put them out as far as possible, but make sure I'm not having overhang. Right now, I just try to move these rings a little bit further back to see if I could gain anything. And now it's overhanging, so it's not getting much surface area, which is not going to bite as much when I tighten it down. This one, maybe I can move it forward a little bit. And I believe that should be good as well. And this is also the time too where if you're going to put a level on there, you want to make sure you have enough space in between your rings for a level as well, because I'm going to put a level in the front, which I'll do in a little bit. But I know looking at this, that this front ring is far enough apart, big enough gap right there to allow me to put a bubble level. And again, just double check everything, make sure everything's golden. Okay, now I kind of want to just mock up a rough eye relief, and to do that, I find it's easier to just tighten these lower ones down. I don't want to pick up my rifle and have my expensive scope fall off. So I'm just going to mock these in, tighten down a little bit so nothing moves. Alright, I don't think that should fall off. And sometimes it's also a good idea to take these gaps and put them on here if you haven't done this in a while or haven't done this at all. Then also take just 2 of them and place them in on the front and place them in on the back ring. That way when I pick this up, again, the scope's not going to fall off. You want to be able to have it loose enough where your scope can move, but not too loose. I'm going to crank my scope, full magnification. I always do this at full power on the rifle scope. And yes, you probably could get in the rifle like this. Lean down into it, close your eyes and open it and try to see where everything's at. I would prefer to do this prone, putting a bipod on and laying down prone to do it. But for demonstrations of this video, I'm just going to pick it up, hold the rifle. Obviously, there's nothing, there's no bolt, there's not any ammo in there. It's totally safe. Aim it at the wall, close my eyes, open them up, and see if it's in the right spot. For my eye relief, if I need to move forward because I have too much black space, or backwards because I have too much black, I can do that just to ensure the perfect eye relief. So grab the rifle, make sure you don't drop it. It's probably pretty good. Usually I like it right above where the bolt sits. Now I'm just going to pick it up, aim it, lower the cheek rest down a little bit, close my eyes, open them up, and you can kind of play with it like this a little bit too, but if you keep your eyes open too long, sometimes your eyes just adjust to it, and you do the whole getting your gun, closing your eyes, opening them, and that should be pretty good. So now it's basically set up for me. That's what I think the biggest thing is when you're setting these up. Yes, you can set up for friends and kind of mock them in, but if I was going to set this up for myself, I'm 6'5", really long arms. You know, my neck and head position could be different for how I lay in the gun. Someone else, depending on their length of pull as well, might not quite work for them. So that's why it's good to, if you're setting up a rifle for someone else, maybe have them look through it before you lock everything down. This is the point right now in the process where I'm going to take a silver Sharpie marker and let's get a little reference mark. I'm doing it on the back side of one, the front of the other side. And I'm also making sure too, again, to reference that I'm not onto the bell and not anything back here where it's going to impede me adjusting the magnification. So that's going to be pretty good right there of set my eye relief. Next part through the process, now we're going to finally start to mount the scope, mount the rings, and get them in their final position. So what I like to do, I have this thing mocked in here, I have my eye relief set. I'm going to actually loosen these back up a little bit, these bottom ones. I go right under the pick rail. Just a little bit, so it gives it a little bit of play in the system. Now I'm going to take all the rest of these, and I'm just going to lightly again torque this top part down. before I do the bottom, because these rings have a chance to move a little bit, and I just want to make sure that everything is true with the tube with the scope before I tighten these in. So if I lock these all the way down, and it's a slight cant to it, I put that scope in there. There could just be a little bit of friction going on, and I'm going to try to avoid any sort of extra friction on the scope that would impede the scope's ability to track at distance. So I'm just going to lightly drop these down. Again, not doing anything real crazy with this. Trying to make them as even as you can if possible. On the side to side, so you don't have one tight and the other one not so tight. Okay. So you can see here I still have a little bit of movement and everything. I haven't locked anything down. So now quickly I want to talk about the importance of a data book. Now I'm going to start getting all the torque specs, everything, and I want everything written down so I remember exactly what I did to this rifle, how I built it, did I add Loctite to it, did I JB weld something, what were my ring torque specs with my, Picatinny torque specs. So every single rifle I have, this is an example of my 300 rum. I have a book on this rifle. Write down all the specs, barrel length, twist, material, contour, what stock I'm using, exact pick rail, again, action torque specs, 18 inch-pounds, lower rings, 50 inch-pounds, upper rings, 19 inch-pounds. And every time I shoot, with any sort of data, how many rounds I have down the barrel, I keep track of everything in one notebook. That way everything's organized. So that's the 300 rum. I just created this one for the 6.8 Western. Very basic stuff right now. Again, what year I got the rifle, what the rifle is, short action, barrel length 26, barrel twist 1 and 7.5, heavy sporter barrel, all the way down. So now I want to make sure I'm referencing those inch-pounds again. So when I put the pick rail on the action, 18 inch-pounds. Lower rings are going to be 50 inch-pounds. So that's going to be these ones right here. I'm going to do 50 on. And then upper rings are going to be roughly 18 to 19 inch-pounds. And I guess I missed this talking about a step earlier. You can see here that screws, the bolts, whatever you want to call them, I put them on the left side away from the action. It's just a personal preference where you do it. If you have some other type style rings that use a big bolt and the nut, they'll use like one of these guys where you clamp it on there. You might want to have it on the left side. That way everything just looks even on the gun. But if you want on the other side, it really doesn't matter. Just my personal preference. I keep everything on the left side. So, okay, so I've lightly put all these screws in the top of the rings to kind of lock everything down. I kept this front one loose for right now because now I'm going to tighten up this bottom and then I'm going to use it to make everything square. So this bottom one on the rings, I always push the rings forward before I lock them down. And so I'm going to push that one forward real quick. Go through here and tighten this lower one down. Start to get it tight. Making sure pushing it down and not pushing it down and like trying to torque it upwards. So I have that front one fairly tight. I'm going to pull the bottom or the back one all the way out. And I'm going to put some Loctite on there. Take some of that Loctite I had before. Keep a toothpick here. Just put a little dab on there. On the threads. Put it back in there. And I'll do the opposite. Tighten that one down, pop this one out. Okay, now I gotta switch sizes. Go to the T25, a torque wrench. Adjust this up to 50 inch-pounds. Again, we're going to alternate so it feels snug. Just move the front one again. Try to make them even. Okay, those ones are set. Make those front ones tight up here. That way it keeps everything concentric again. Start to snug both of them a little bit. Again, that first one was snug, everything was pushed forward. Torque wrench, I just did it earlier, but I'm double checking that's 50 inch-pounds. And again, alternating back and forth between the two. Alright, those are torqued. Time to pull off the top rings. This is the time where you're going to appreciate having your rings labeled, what's front and what's back. Got the reference marks for the eye relief, pull the scope off. Probably should have put my caps on earlier so I don't scratch these up. Next step is going to be, I'm going to lap the rings. So I'm going to start to take a rod here, add some compound to it, and basically make everything even more concentric. Yes, these are cut really, really nice. And people say you don't need to lap precision rings, but I would lap every ring. I don't care what manufacturer it is. It's my style. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. If you trust your manufacturer how to do it, by all means don't lap, but I do it. So I'm just going to throw that clause out there because you're probably going to, void the warranty on your rings. But it's a precision rifle, and I want to do precision work, so I'm going to lap them. So I'm going to go that way. So in this box, I got a bunch of my lapping components. I have some other ones underneath the table for other scopes, depending on what the tube is. I need to grab the bar for, it's a 30 mil tube, so I grab a 30 mil bar. And you'll see here, 30 mil bar fits right in there. And you can see used and abused throughout a bunch of different guns. So we'll grab that, grab the 220 grit, we'll get to lapping. Okay, now on to, again, lapping process. Got the bar on there, got all the tools I need. Got the 220 grit here. And I'm just going to apply a thin layer on the lower rings and a thin layer on the upper rings. And it looks like I need to get some more compound eventually. So again, I'm just going to apply it on the lower part of the ring. Try not to get big giant goops of it. Trying to keep just a thin layer. Obviously everything will move around once I get it going. And you don't need a lot on the top ring, because it'll still start moving everything around, but I'm just going to put a little bit on there. Paper towels always come in handy. If you get anything in the top, sometimes I just like to get rid of it. I don't really want that stuff on the top, even though there will be a gap in there when you tighten all these down later. Just, I don't want to get in the threads. I'm going to take the bar, drop it on top. This is where, again, having these things matched correctly of where they go is very important. I want the front in the front, and I want the rear in the spot where it goes with the rear one. Now we're going to lightly torque, no, I guess torque's the wrong word, lightly tighten these down. And again, trying to keep them even as possible. The old crisscross pattern. I definitely didn't tighten those all the way yet. You can see we're going to still move it. And this is basically what the lapping process is about. I'll keep tightening those down and keep moving this thing back and forth to try to take away some material to make these things perfectly concentric with each other, with the bar. And just makes an overall better product in my mind. So just going to keep tightening them down slowly. It's probably good enough now. And now just as I do it, I'm just going to tighten these up a little bit more. Okay, make sure you have everything organized. Put a bunch of lactic compound on the top. We're going to clean this off. What I'm hoping to get out of this is at least 75-ish% of the rings all cleared off. And I can tell because it'll be black and there'll be a bunch of silver areas. And I'm definitely going to have to do another round. So you'll see here, there's that guy, that one. That's the front. This is the rear. And if you do this and you're using some carb cleaner, you just want to make sure you're not going to rub away your marks. So that one's kind of going away a little bit. This one to remark it. Just so I know that's the back one. So see, I got those two little guys right there. And that one's getting pretty close. This one you can see here is only taking off material up there. And I want to take off a little bit more because it might be slightly, not exactly true. Maybe it's how I put these things together. Maybe it's how they're manufactured. But I want to make it perfect for my setup right now. And I'm just going to take a little bit more material off just to make sure it's perfect. And the bottom rings are getting really close. This back one, again, needs a little bit more. So I can tell when I was doing this, I had the front a little bit tighter than the rear. And so I need do a little bit more in the rear and not as much in the front. So we'll do the process again. Still going to add a little bit to the front. But I know I don't need to do much more in the front. Just in case. Safe to say, we're done. I'm just going to clean these up, double check the front, double check the bottoms, but that's a good sign right now. I just want to test that out to make sure if I took everything apart and do it again, I have what looks like 80% contact removed, maybe a little bit more, so that's kind of what we're looking for. Lap the rings, as you can see here, got a bunch of compound off both of those. I want to mention, can't say my words right. I want to mention one thing. So while lapping, as you can see over the years, I'm starting to take down some slight material off the bar. So maybe eventually I might have to get a new one of these because after so much wear and tear, you might not get that same concentric 30 mil lapping job as you would with the brand new one. So just something to keep in mind. This next part is one that I'm sure people will say it's not necessary at all, but I like to do it on all my guns. Again, all my 30 cals I do this, and the 6.8 I'm doing it as well. I'm actually going to bed the rings to the scope, and that way it'll enable 100% total stress-free. Me dropping it in there, everything's gonna be perfect. And right now, as you can see, it is pretty dialed already. I'm gonna drop this in here. There's not gonna be any play, not gonna be any movement, like flex side to side. But if there is, I just want to eliminate it. So what I'm going to do is mix up a little bit of, switching over from the JB Weld to JB Quick. Mix up the two little things here. Put a tiny bead in the lower part of the rings. I'm going to set this down and lightly hand tighten it, and let it sit there for 25 minutes. But before we do that, I'm going to take some Johnson's paste wax here. Or again, I could use a bunch of this kiwi. A pile of it, as I explained before when I bought the house. I'm going to load this up all on my scope. Since I'm going to be basically bedding it, I do not want my scope to adhere to the rings because it's not going to be level at this time. So this kind of gets a little bit scary. But I've done a lot. And a lot of practice means you can do it safely on your own guns and your friends' guns. So I'm just going to coat this the paste wax all around my scope. just on the main tube here. I'm trying to make it an even film as well. I don't want any like clumps, like I would not want to leave it like that as I push that on there, because it could make it a little stress in that spot. So to smooth it all out, nice and even. If you get a lot of it, take a paper towel. We just clean out the big area. But again, make sure if you do that, you get it coated. Do not want to have a section that doesn't have this on it. Do the same thing on the front side of the tube. That's dialed, that's good. Set this off to the side. Again, be very careful before you set it. Now I need to mix up some stuff in there, but first I want to double check that those are all clean and dialed. So again, some towel here, acetone. Make sure that's just nice and dirty. And this quick stuff, compared to the JB Weld, actually sets up a lot quicker. So once I get this going, I'm not going to waste a lot of time. I'm just going to do a little thin bead, put it on there, get all my tools ready ahead of time, get some Q-tips, set out, cut the top of the Q-tip off. Get my little handy nail with a stir stick. You're probably not going to be able to see what I'm doing right now, but I'm just taking the hardener and the steel, putting it on here, 2 little lines, stirring it all together. And we're going to apply it onto there. Again, little goes a long way, so you're not going to need a ton of this stuff. Okay, oops. You can see that, got 2 lines, steel and hardener. I'm just going to mix it all together. If you got any white in there, you're going to mix it around, make sure it's all together. If you got some black, mix it in with white, of course. Get everything perfect. Cut up some material. And just drop it on the lower ring. Now again, I'm just going to make a thin layer in all the areas because I want full contact. Just going to get out any other random imperfections. Again, probably not needed, but I strive for accuracy because I'm hunting. I only get one shot. I want the one shot to make it count. So I feel all this stuff is worth the extra time. Especially if you can make a nice product that you're proud of. Okay, now the scary part. I'm gonna set the scope in there. Not gonna move it. Might make sure this is still golden, still even. A little extra of that wax. I guess you'll see both my reference marks from before. So I'm not going to twist this, not worrying about it being too perfectly level, but I'm going to try not to move it once I set it in there. Just going to let the weight of it do its thing. Okay, I'm going to put the top rings on. Again, making things even, crisscross pattern, same as always. And you should be able to look all around, and I have a bunch of that JB Quick escaped out in between the scope and the ring. I can see it's all the way around, nice and uniform. Again, just like I'm barely able to move it with 2 fingers or 2 hands. That's as tight as I want to go. Do not want to torque it. So that will kind of defeat the purpose and squeeze out everything. So now, let that sit there for 30, 45 minutes and dry, and then we'll pop this off and scrape it with a knife or a razor blade or that sort of thing. So just let it dry. So let the JB quick basically dry for an hour now. I'm going to pop this thing off and do a little cleanup on it and then let it sit there for 24 hours. But I have the release agent on, so everything should just come right off. Normally I probably let it sit for a little bit longer before I pop this off, but doing the video, we'll just get to the scraping part. Now we're just going to carefully lift it up and try not to torque anything. It should just pop right up with a little bit of force. And there we go. Popped it all off. Didn't drop the scope, which is always a good thing. And now let's do more cleanup. And the easiest way to do it is just use your knife on the edge. Try not to get into your JB quick, but just go right along the edge of the rail or the ring. And I had a little bit stick on the scope, but not too much of an issue. And you can see everything seems to fit a little bit tighter. Yeah. Now I'm just going to let it dry by 24 hours and mount the scope. So let it dry. I got a lot of cleanup to do. As you can see, more mess of tools. So get this cleaned up, let it dry. Do more later.